الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم ربنا ألهمنا رشدنا وأعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى. اللهم اجعلنا من عبادك الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. Dear brothers and sisters and sons and daughters in Islam, essentially we have to begin with the study of the selected course of study that I compiled about 30 years ago. But before we start with the study of this selected course of study of the Quran, first of all, there are a few points which were left over last evening from our discussion about the introduction to the Quran. First of all, names of the Quran. It is the habit and the taste of the Arabs that anything which they love more or like more or adore more, they give that thing many names. And this habit of theirs, we find, has been satisfied fully by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in His eternal kalam. Allah Himself has given Himself 99 names. Allah by His name. In the same way we find there are many names of the Quran which have appeared in the Quran itself. Just as out of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is most famous. In the same way, out of the names of the Quran, Al-Quran is the most famous. But there are so many other names. Al-Quran, Al-Furqan, Al-Kitab, Al-Zikr, Al-Nur, Al-Huda, and so on. Nearly 25 names have been given by Allama Jalaluddin Suyuti, rahimahullah, in his famous book, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran. And all these names appear in the Quran. But I need not give you the full details of this list. Only an impression. These are all names, and then adjectives are added to them. Al-Quran al-Hakim, Al-Quran al-Majid, Al-Quran al-Kareem. So actually, Al-Kareem, Al-Majid, Al-Hakim, Al-Mubin, Hamim wal-Kitab al-Mubin. Now these are the adjectives added. Now you can multiply the names with the adjectives. With Al-Quran we have Yasin wal-Quran al-Hakim, Qaf wal-Quran al-Majid, Saad wal-Quran al-Zikr, Quran al-Hakim, Quran al-Majid, Quran al-Kareem, bal huwa Quran Majidun fi lawhin mahfuz, innahu la Quran Kareemun fi kitabin maknoon, and so on. I must give you the meanings of the most famous name of the Quran, and that is Al-Quran itself. There are two opinions about the root of this word. Qaf, Ra, Noon, Qarn. Qarn means to bring something together. The same concept as we have in the English word composition. This composition, you compose your ideas and then you express them in a composition. That composition essentially contains and consists of sentences and words and so on. So actually, this Qarn, that is one opinion, that Al-Quran is derived from Qarn. The second and more famous, more agreed upon, that is from Qara'a. Qaf, Ra, Hamza, Qara'a. And this has also two meanings, but the more famous is to read. Qara'atu, I read. Iqra, read. So from qara'a, Quran, it is the objective of qira'at, something that is to be read, readable, something which is worthy of reading. We have on this scale other words also which denote to maf'ul. For example, ghufran, ghufranaka rabbana. We ask you your forgiveness. Here it is maf'ul. Subhanaka Allahumma. Subhan, ghufran, rujhan, all these things on this very scale, on this very wazn as they call it in Arabic language. You have so many words. In the same scale we find Quran from qara'a yaqra'u. That is something to be read. So these are two famous opinions. There are other opinions also. And the likeliness of this name of Quran to the name of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word Allah, the word Quran. Allah is also a word, a name of Allah, about which there is much controversy about the root. And the same is the case with Al-Quran. There are different opinions about the root of this word. The second most famous, Al-Furqan, Faraqa Yafruqu, something which divides other things, separates them. Faraqa Yafruqu. Al-Furqan, something which differentiates reality from falsehood. Haq min al-batil. What is false, what is real. Differentiation is to be made by Quran. So Al-Furqan. Then Az-Zikr, I told you last evening, remembrance, reminding, because the basic philosophy of the Quran is that the cognition of Allah, ma'rifah, and love of Allah, both these are inherent in human souls. Every human being knows Allah, loves Allah. This is inherent in his soul, in his spirit. Because this spirit came from Allah. يَسَأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. The only difficulty is that we are so much engrossed in this world, so much busy, occupied, that we never look to our hearts. We never try to hear the testimony of our souls emerging from the depths of our souls and hearts. What Quran does, it actually exhorts us and makes it easy for us to remember, to be mindful of what is there in your very nature. So that is the meaning of zikr. This is az-zikr, the remembrance or the reminding. Then al-kitab. The more common understanding of this word is something which has been written. Kataba yaktubu, to write. Al-kitab, written thing. But actually, we shall discuss it later, inshallah, during this study of our selected course of the Quran. The kitab in Quran means law. Because wherever there is a legal injunction of the Quran, the word has been used kutiba. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kutiba alaykum al-qital, inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. So whatsoever has been written, it has been decided finally, that's all. No more argument, no more discussion. Kutiba. And this is for something which has made obligatory first. So actually, kitab means law, sharia. So this book contains law, sharia. Rather the final shape and the most complete shape of the sharia, which started with Torah. That was the beginning of sharia. And that sharia has reached its zenith and climax in the Quran. So this is al-kitab. Both meanings you can have before you. Both are valid. Something which is written and something which is obligatory, which is first, which has to be obeyed anyhow. An-Nur, the light. Because it shows you the hidden realities of this universe, to which referred in my last evening lecture, the philosophical quest in man. Who am I? What is this universe? What's the beginning or the end of this universe? What's the creation? Who am I? Wherefrom have I come? Born from the blue? And is that the end of my life or existence? Where do I go? Where do I go after that? Is that the end? What is good? What is evil? What is knowledge? All these are philosophical questions which have been haunting the minds of people, intelligent people. So actually, these are the hidden realities. They will never be explored by physical sciences. This is ghaib. That is why this word appears in the very beginning of the Quran. Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. And let me quote here a saying of Confucius, the Chinese saint or sage or philosopher, whatsoever you may call him. He says in a very beautiful sentence, there is nothing more real than what cannot be seen, and that is nothing more, there is nothing more certain than what cannot be heard. This is the apparent world. But the reality lies beyond the scope of your senses and sense organs. This is the ghaib. Now as we need light to see the facts of this world, material world, even if our eyes are okay, we can't see without light. In the same way, to be able to see and comprehend the hidden realities of this universe, you need an inner light, and that inner light is Quran. An-Nur. It reveals all the hidden realities of this creation, of this universe. In the same way, Al-Huda, that I discussed last night. Al-Huda, at the individual level also. How to build a healthy, normal, human personality. Number two, how to establish a just social order. Al-Huda, we need guidance. Where to go, where not to go. What to do, what not to do. So this is the practical aspect of Quran, Al-Huda. It is the guidance. So I finish my discussion on this topic with this. This is about the names of the Quran and then the adjectives. I have mentioned to you a few of them. Now the second point, which was left over yesterday. I told you the final unit, basic unit of Quran is ayah. Ayah means a sign and symbol of divine knowledge and wisdom. Ayahs, they go to make, they are composed into surah. Surah means literally a rampart, a big wall, tall, high wall surrounding a city. What does it denote? Every surah of the Quran is a city of the knowledge. Just as we hear a hadith, I have not been able to ascertain the validity of the hadith, but I think it's commonly accepted. Ana madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. So every surah of Quran is a madinatul ilm. It's a city of knowledge and wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And around that city of knowledge is a surah, and it defines the surah. These things I had discussed last evening. The point is, every surah has a central theme. The ayat have not been joined together without any basis. Otherwise it would be very easy to fix the number 10 ayat, go to make a surah. Another 10, another surah. Another 10, another surah. Or so on. 4, 5. But when you see, there are surahs of having 3 ayat only. Surahs having 300 ayat. 286 is very near 300. So there is some wisdom behind it. Jailul Hakim la yakhlu anil hikmah. No action of a wise man can be without wisdom. Necessarily there's wisdom behind it. And Allah is Al-Hakim. So if He has decided these surahs to be formed like this, there's definitely hikmah, wisdom, purpose. So every surah has a central theme, and we call it umud. Umud, the column, umud. And all the ayat that are included in that surah are connected logically to that central theme. We can keep before us the example of a garland. It has a wire or something of that sort, a thread, in which the diamonds or the pearls or the flowers, they are kneaded together. So actually every ayah is like a flower, like a diamond of divine beauty and divine wisdom and divine knowledge. But then that thread of that surah has made it into a garland. And every flower, every diamond, every pearl has a beauty of its own. But when you arrange them, another dimension of beauty is added due to that arrangement. So that arrangement of ayat in the form of surahs is very important. Next, most of the surahs of the Quran are in pairs. The rule of creation we find in the Quran is وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ. All creation that we have made consists of pairs. It's a rule. Although Quran is not a creation, it was a big dispute in the Abbasid period. But don't think about that dispute. But this rule appears to be so liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has made these surahs also in pairs. We end with two surahs, Wawwadatayn, Wawwadatan. The same subject, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. It could be joined in one surah? No, two surahs. The first two surahs after Surah Al-Fatiha. Surah Al-Fatiha, the pair of Surah Al-Fatiha is the whole of Quran, because it's like a preface to the whole of the book. But then we have Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Imran, and the Prophet ﷺ has given both these surahs one name, Az-Zahrawan. Two very bright surahs of the Quran. Al-Ghamamatan. So there is tasniyah, this siga of tasniyah, two. Then you find in the 29th, in the end of the 28th part of Quran, Surah Al-Tahrim, Surah Al-Talaq. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu idha tallaqtumun nisa. ila akhir al-ayah. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu lima tuharrimu ma ahallallahu lak. Both surahs are beginning with the same word. Then we have Surah Muzammil, Surah Muddassir. Ya ayyuhal Muzammil qum. Ya ayyuhal Muddassir qum. This is only to give you a few examples. Most of these surahs of the Quran, they are in pairs. And what's the use of these pairs? Human beings are in pairs, male and female. All animals are in pairs, males and females. So what do you understand what this pair is? Man, woman, 90% they are alike. They are similar to each other. He cow and she cow, both are the same. Only a small difference. So there must be similarity in the two surahs of a pair to a great extent. But then there should be some difference also. But this difference has to be complementary. Complementary. They must join together for some purpose. Why this male and female? For progeny, for procreation. There can be no procreation without the other pair, you know. No male can have procreation, no female can have procreation. But both, they actually, this difference is for a purpose, not without any purpose. So this is essentially the meaning of a pair. In the same way, in the two surahs of a pair, you will find one aspect of the same subject being discussed in one surah, and the other aspect of the same subject you will find in the other surah. Just as you call two aspects of a picture, two sides of a picture, two sides of a leaf. They go to make a page. So in the same way, these surahs, they are in pairs. There are very few surahs which are individual, alone, without any pair. Most of the surahs in pairs. Then now these surahs, I told you, they go to make groups. These groups, as we have discussed last evening, there are 7 groups, small and big. Just as the ayat are small and big, just as the ahzab are small and big, just as the surahs are small as well as big, in the same way the groups are small or big. But every group again consists of a pair. As I told you, one or more surahs from the Makki Quran, and then one or more surahs from the Madani Quran. Again a pair. We find Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Imran, Surah Al-Nisa, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Madanis. And in the beginning, Surah Fatiha, the most important, profound surah, that is Makki. Then we have two surahs, Makki, Al-A'raf, Al-An'am. Then two surahs who are Madani, Al-Anfal, At-Tawbah. Then starting from Surah Yunus till Surah Al-Mu'minun, 14 surahs Makki. Then we have Surah Al-Nur, that's Madani. Again 8 surahs Makki. And then one surah Madani, Surah Al-Ahzab, and so on. So here also you will find that every group has a central theme or umud. And one aspect of that umud or that central theme is discussed in the button surahs of that group, and the other aspect of that umud or that central theme of that group is discussed in the Madani surahs. I think this should suffice, because when we proceed with our regular study, I'll be mentioning these things time and again, so that these things become clearer and clearer. Secondly, I want to introduce you to the selected course of study. We are not going to study Quran serially from the beginning, continuously, no. Actually, it's going to be a selected course of study of the Quran. What's the background? What's the history? What's the basis of selection? How it came into existence? It is as if from the introduction to the Quran as a whole, now we are shifting to the introduction of this selected course of study of the Quran. The history is that when I was very young, only 19 years of age, I was studying the third year of MBBS course at the King Edward Medical College in Lahore. I was an active member of Islamic Jamiat Talaba. I was appointed or elected, whatever you may say, the Nazim or organizer of the local chapter of the Jamia at Lahore, as well as the provincial chapter of the Jamia of Punjab. In December 1951, I organized a camp, training camp for the members of the Jamia. We, just as some of the brothers are staying here together, it reminds me of those days, of my early youth. 43 years back, I had, I think, about 30, 35 students. We were living at one place for 10 days. Some scholar was teaching us some ahadith, someone else was teaching us some Quran. Naturally, whole of the Quran couldn't be taught. So there had to be some selection. And I was fortunate enough, I must say, that Maulana Amin Islahi taught us Quran for those 10 days. Or Maulana Abul Ala Maududi, rahimahullah, he taught us hadith for those 10 days. Maulana Naim Siddiqui, he taught us some literature during those 10 days. Malik Ghulam Ali, he taught us some fiqh during those 10 days. So now, about the Quran. Maulana Amin Islahi, he selected 5 or 6 places from the Quran. For example, to give you a glimpse of what a moment should be. What should be the foundations of the character of a moment? He selected 2 parts. The first 11 ayat of Surah Al-Mu'minun and similar ayat from Surah Al-Ma'arij. Then what is the basis of a Muslim family? He taught us Surah Al-Tahrim. Then what are the basic principles of the organization of the Ummah? He taught us Al-Hujurat. Then what is Jihad fi Sabilillah? And what's the aim and object of Jihad fi Sabilillah? And what's the difference between Jihad and Qital fi Sabilillah? For that he chose Surah Al-Saf. Then what are the difficulties and tests in this way, when you want to establish the deen of Allah, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, and how you are required to be steadfast, to show forbearance, for that he selected Surah Al-Ankabut. So these were the places of the Quran which he taught us. Again, in the summer vacation of 1952, I organized another camp, and a bigger one. I was lucky to be the organizer of both the camps. Then I again listened to the dars of Maulana Amir Nasr's life on these places. So that is actually the beginning of this concept of a selected course of study. Later on I, built it. I filled the gaps in between. I gave it a firm basis. That basis is Surah Al-Asr, the starting point. And in about 15 years' time, I finished this work of composing or editing the selected course of study of the Quran. And for the last 25 to 30 years, I've been explaining this selected course of study. Many times I've spoken about it, from the very beginning till the end. And there have been videos and audios. Videos are just a recent phenomenon. But audios, they were available in the very beginning also. But this was actually in Urdu all the time. There was a demand from the Western world, people who listened to those tapes, and they found them beneficial, useful. So there was a demand that you should deliver these durus in English also. I hesitated badly, because I've never lived for any considerable time in any Western country. I was never a student of English literature. Although medicine was taught in English, but that's a technical language, not a literary language. So I was very hesitant. It was only last year when I visited here, and my first sermon was the Jummah sermon at Trenton Mosque. I think the name is Masjid al-Safa at Trenton. I felt that it seems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has opened the knot of my tongue. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani. And I felt that maybe I can do this work. And that is how I'm here for this job. So this is actually the historical background of this selected course of study. And I must say that my all efforts of these 40 years, they revolve around this selected course of study. From my lessons and rules of the selected course of study came up the organization Anjuman Khuddam al-Quran, the Society of the Servants of the Quran at Lahore, and then its branches grew. Then on that very basis, because it gives us the idea of the basic duties of a Muslim, then I had to found Tanzeem Islami. Those people who are ready to do their lot, their bit, who are ready to fulfill their obligations towards Islam, they must join together. La Islama illa bi Jama'ah. So that Jama'ah was Tanzeem Islami and is Tanzeem Islami. So all this actually, you may say, these are the fruits of the same tree. The tree is actually the whole of Quran, but practically I should say, that tree is this selected course of study. Now the second point about this selected course of study of the Quran is, what's the objective? Selection can be made from the Quran on different issues, different topics. For example, if one decides to select the verses and the ayat and the surahs which discuss exclusively and specifically the principle of Tawheed, there will be a selected course of study of the Quran for Tawheed. There could be another one about Risalah. What is the messengerhood? It has been discussed at various places in the Quran. You select them, join them together, it becomes another course of study. There could be a selected course of study for guidance, especially for women. It could become a selected course of study of those ayat, those surahs, which deal with the problems of women, particularly. So there can be hundreds of courses of study selected from Quran. But what is the basis of the selection of the surahs or ayat which I have included in this selected course of study? Two things are the main objective. Number one, it should be clear to the listener and the student what Islam is. Is it a dogma only? Or does it consist of rituals only? Or does it consist of, in addition to dogma and rituals, some social customs alone? What it is? It should become absolutely clear. Our cognition, our understanding of Quran as a whole, of Islam, what is Islam? And number two, and more important, what Islam requires of us. What are our duties and obligations for Islam? What our Creator, our Sustainer, our Lord demands of us? What does He want from us? What has He made obligatory on us? What are the faraiz, the duties? Because I feel the most of the inaction or evil action of the ummah, be'amali or bad'amali, springs from a narrow and limited concept of Islam, and more so from a narrow and limited concept of the duties of a Muslim. This concept of the duties of a Muslim has become very narrow, very limited. Now, the behavior and practical attitude of a person necessarily depends upon his own conceptions. I have been giving an example. If you employ a person and you tell him, these are 10 duties that you have to perform every day. Due to some accident, he remembers only 3. He has forgotten the rest of the 7. Now, he might be the most sincere person. He might be the most hard-working person. But all his work and achievement will be limited to those 3 duties. Regarding the rest of the 7, his achievement, his performance will be 0. Will he be a successful servant in the eyes of the employer? Despite the sincerity, despite the hardest labor that he has put in, he will be declared unsuccessful. And you are getting full marks in 3 papers, but zeros in 7. How can you pass? So actually these 2 things are most fundamental. The decadence, the downfall of the Muslim Ummah is based on these 2 things. The concept of Islam, changing from deen to mazhab. It has become a religion, not deen. And number 2, the concept of our duties as Muslims has become very limited, very narrow. So there are people, very pious people, regarding those narrow things. खाल इस कौम में अब तक नजर आते हैं, वो करते हैं अश्के सहर गाही से जो जालिम वुजू. But what is happening to the ummah as a whole? Why? Because the Muslims, by and large, they have forgotten their duties as Muslims. Even those who are very pious, very muttaqi, they are making prayers, all the 5 prayers in the mosque. But they are just ignorant of their other duties. So that is actually the more important objective in selecting the ayat and the surahs which have been included in this selected course of study. And that is why I have given the basis of Surah Al-Asr. Because Surah Al-Asr discusses the same question. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Here 4 prerequisites, preconditions have been mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for salvation. You cannot hope salvation without fulfilling four conditions. Prerequisites and preconditions of falah or najah, salvation or success. So this selected course of study consists of 6 parts. In part 1, along with Surah Al-Asr, there are 3 more places which are more or less as much profound as Surah Al-Asr itself. These 4 lessons will be in part 1. Then part 2 will discuss the first condition in detail. What is Iman? Illa alladhina amanu. Part 3 consists of surahs and ayat, especially which deal with amal salih, the good deeds, the righteous deeds. But there are different levels, at individual level, at social level, at the level of state, ummah, millah. So this will be 3 levels of good deeds, righteous deeds. Then in the 4th, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, the different terms regarding tawasi bil-haqq. You should be able to proclaim the truth. You should be able to preach it to others. Then the 5th, tawasi bil-sabr. You have to be steadfast and forbearing. You will have to pass through tribulations and tests, because it's easy to tell a truth, but truth is always bitter. It brings resentment, maybe persecution. And now you have to be steadfast and forbearing. You need endurance. Number 6, part number 6 again, the most comprehensive, most profound surah of the Quran regarding this subject. That is Surah Al-Hadid. And that is the only surah in that whole part, number 6. So this is a brief introduction to the selected course of study which we will be inshallah discussing in these sessions. And now I start with Surah Al-Asr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العظيم. First of all, I want to give you the translations given by 4 authors. First of all, how has Muhammad Marmaduke Iqbal translated this surah? By the declining day. Wal Asr, he translates into by the declining day. Innal insana lafi khusr. Lo, man is in a state of loss. The 3rd ayah, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Save those who believe and do good works and exhort one another to truth and exhort one another to endurance. Second translation from Allama Asad. Consider the flight of time. Wal Asr, flight of time. Consider the flight of time. Verily man is bound to lose himself unless he be of those who attain to faith and do good works, and enjoin upon one another the keeping of truth, and enjoin upon one another patience in adversity. To give you the 3rd, it is from Abdullah Yusuf Ali of the Indian subcontinent. By the token of time, through the ages, verily man is in loss, except such as have faith and do righteous deeds and join together in the mutual teaching of truth and of patience and constancy. Lastly, from Maulana Maududi, although this is not the English translation by Maulana Maududi himself, his Urdu translation has been translated by somebody else. But I want to give you the idea that he has. By the time man is surely in great loss, except those who believed and did good works and exhorted one another to the truth, and exhorted one another to patience. These are the 4 translations. There's very little difference. We will be discussing these things later, but I wanted to give you the translations from both these 4 authors. Now I propose to discuss this Surah Al-Asr only at the level of tazakkur, not tadabbur. I mentioned these 2 words last evening. Tazakkur, to get the real lesson of something. We used to read stories in our early childhood, and then in the end, what's the lesson of the story? Story was, for example, 1 page long, but the lesson was 1 sentence. So the lesson or the essence of the surah, and I gave you the example, that just as if the oil is spilt in the sea, you have a layer of oil on the surface. The water is very deep, maybe miles deep, but the oil is on the surface. So the composition of Quran is such that its lesson or essence is on the top, which can be had very easily, which can be approached, understood very easily. That's why I quoted the ayah that has been repeated 4 times in Surah Al-Qamar. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made this Quran very easy for tazakkur. So is there anybody who wants to have the tazakkur? It's a very challenging style of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't say to us that, oh Allah, you sent a book which was very difficult. I couldn't understand it. You can't say. We have made it very easy. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Only if you have the intention or the niyyah, you will find it the most plain and simple, self-explanatory book. The essence or the lesson would be at the top. Get it? Just as you pluck a flower from the plant. It's so easy. Although this flower is attached to the whole plant. It couldn't be there without the whole plant. But you can get the flower. So tazakkur actually, I'll be discussing it only at the level of tazakkur, not tadabbur. Why? Number 1. The whole selected course of this study is actually the tadabbur of Surah Al-Asr. When we will be discussing Iman in detail, we will be discussing Amal Saleh in detail, different aspects and stages of Tawasi bil-Haq in detail, different stages of Tawasi bil-Sabr, it will be actually an explanation, extension, and exfoliation of this same Surah Al-Asr. For that matter, we may be able to say that actually whole Quran is the extension and exfoliation of Surah Al-Asr. I'll come to this point later. Number 2, at least on Surah Al-Asr, I have a published work. The Road to Salvation in the Light of Surah Al-Asr. The Path to Salvation in the Light of Surah Al-Asr. It consists one of my writings and one of speeches. My speeches. And I think it should suffice for those who want to understand and share with me my understanding of this great surah of the Quran. It has been translated into English also. In Urdu, we have a bound edition also. In English, it's unbound, it can be had. So I don't want to give more time or take more time in discussing Surah Al-Asr in this series of lectures, because we have to go a long way. And I will try to save as much time as I can. Now I'm starting with 4 preliminary things about Surah Al-Asr. Try to remember them. Very simple. Just before us, only to be noted and enlisted in your minds. Number 1, this is one of the most early or the earliest surahs of the Quran revealed at Makkah. And Quran itself defines its style in Surah Hud alayhi salatu wassalam. Kitabun uhkimat ayatuhu thumma fussilat min ladun hakimin khabir. This is a book whose ayat have been muhkam, very profound in the beginning, very profound ayat and surahs were revealed. Later on, details came of the same surahs. So actually, this is a very famous and very noteworthy example of this. Uhkimat ayatuhu summa fussilat. And this, it was revealed in very early Meccan period. Number two, it's one of the smallest surahs of the Quran. There are only 3 surahs of the Quran which comprise of 3 ayat. Suratul Asr, Suratul Kawthar, and Suratul Nasr. 3. You know, this figure 3 seems to have some importance, because we know that it's necessary to recite 3 ayat in a rak'ah, in salah, in prayer. Or if the ayah is very big, then one would also suffice. If it is Ayatul Kursi or Ayatul Bir or Ayatul Dain and so on, one can suffice. But if they are small ayat, you have to recite at least 3. And it's not incidental that 3 surahs of the Quran comprise of 3 ayat. But this is the smallest. No surah has only 2 ayat. And there can be no surah of 1 ayah. Then there will be no difference between the surah and the ayah. But actually, composition means when you have composed a few sentences. Surah will mean when a few ayat are joined together to make a surah. And the least number is 2, 3, which we find in the Quran. So this is one of the smallest surahs of the Quran. This is one of the earliest surahs of the Quran. But now note the difference in words. This is the most profound and comprehensive surah of the Quran. Here I have not used the word one of the most profound. No. The most profound and the most comprehensive surah of the Quran. I am absolutely emphatic on this point. And this emphasis that I am putting on this point is not without any basis. Let me quote here about the practice of the Sahaba Kiram, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in. There is a tradition given by Tabrani in his Awsat. Imam Tabrani, he edited 3 books of ahadith: Kabir, Awsat, Saghir. But in the Awsat, he has included this riwayah. And it has been included by Imam Bayhaqi in his famous book, Shu'ab al-Iman. Very important tradition of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. The wordings are, كان الرجلان من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا التقيا لم يتفرقا حتى يقرأ أحدهما على الآخر سورة العصر ثم يسلم أحدهما على الآخر. When 2 persons from among the companions of the Prophet used to meet with each other, they never departed from each other unless they had recited one to the other and the other to the first, Surah Al-Asr. This practice of the Sahaba couldn't be without any reason. I will discuss it later. What's the need? What's the necessity to recite this surah? So common. Although we may think, and we do think, Surah Al-Ikhlas is much high, much more exalted. Surah Al-Fatiha is at a very high level. Ummul Quran, Asasul Quran. But the practice of the Sahaba, of the companions, is regarding Surah Al-Asr. There's a basis, there's a reason. I will discuss later. But to give you the glimpse, from the practice of the companions, that is in itself an argument. They were the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. كان الرجلان من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا التقيا لم يتفرقا حتى يقرأ أحدهما على الآخر سورة العصر ثم يسلم أحدهما على الآخر. Then they used to salute each other, say Assalamu alaikum, and then depart. Secondly, let me give you 2 sayings of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. One saying has been reported by Hafiz ibn Kathir rahimahullah, the famous Mufassir. According to Hafiz ibn Kathir, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah has said, لَوْ تَدَبَّرَ النَّاسُ هَذِهِ السُّورَةَ لَوَسِعَتْهُمْ. If people ponder over only this one surah of the Quran, it will suffice for their guidance. And according to another saying, it has been reported by Mufti Muhammad Abduhu of Egypt in his exegesis of the last part of the Quran. And the saying that he reported is, لَوْ لَمْ يُنَزَّلْ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ سِوَاهَا لَكَفَتِ النَّاسِ. Even if nothing else was revealed in the Quran except this Surah Al-Asr, only this surah would have been sufficient for the total guidance to humanity. Now just note, these are not the sayings of some ordinary person. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, although the Hanafis do think, and I also do think, that regards the legal understanding of the deen, legal and constitutional aspects of deen, Imam Abu Hanifa stands at a much higher level than Imam Shafi'i. But the principles of jurisprudence of the Quran, he is the beginner of this great science in Islam. And he is definitely at least number 2 Imam among the 4 Imams that are accepted by all Ahlul Sunnah. That is his stature. And he has said these 2 things. لَوْ لَمْ يُنَزَّلْ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ سِوَاهَا لَكَفَتِ النَّاسِ لَوْ تَدَبَّرَ النَّاسُ هَذِهِ السُّورَةَ لَوَسِعَتْهُمْ. May Allah give us the correct understanding of this surah. And may He make us from those who act according to this surah. اللهم ربنا اجعلنا من عبادك الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم ربنا ألهمنا رشدنا وأعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم ربنا نور قلوبنا بالإيمان واشرح صدورنا للإسلام ووفقنا لما تحب وترضى وتقبل منا فإنك خير المتقبلين. اللهم اجعلنا من عبادك الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين يا رب العالمين. By the fleeting time, verily all humans are doomed except those who had the real faith and did good deeds and exhorted each other to whatever is true and exhorted each other for patience and forbearance. We started our discussion on Surah Al-Asr in the last session. I was giving you 4 preliminary points. I had given 3. Number 1, it's one of the most early surahs of the Quran, one of the earliest Makki surahs of the Quran. Number 2, it is one of the smallest surahs of the Quran. But number 3 was very important. It's the most profound, most comprehensive surah of the Quran regarding the conditions and prerequisites of salvation. The most profound and most comprehensive surah of the Quran on Tawheed is Surah Al-Ikhlas. The most profound and the most comprehensive surah on the philosophy of the Quran is Surah Al-Fatiha. But the most profound and the most comprehensive surah of the Quran regarding the practical path towards salvation and success in the life hereafter is Surah Al-Asr. I gave you the practice of the messengers, companions, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. كان الرجلان من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا التقيا لم يتفرقا حتى يقرأ أحدهما على الآخر سورة العصر ثم يسلم أحدهما على الآخر. رواه البيهقي والطبراني رحمهم الله. Then the sayings of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, reported by Ibn Kasir rahimahullah, لو تدبر الناس هذه السورة لوسعتهم. The second one, reported by Mufti Muhammad Abduhu, لو لم ينزل من القرآن سواها لكفت الناس. Now the final and the fourth preliminary point is that the language of this surah is very simple, extremely simple. The subject is so important, comprehensive, profound, but the language is the simplest possible Arabic. Although actually the subject matter of the surah deals with philosophy, but no philosophical terminology used, no logic, terms of logic used, no verbosity, no bombastic words, nothing of this sort. Every Bedouin could understand. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And what to speak of the Bedouins? Even somewhat educated Urdu-speaking people, even if they are half-educated or quarter-educated, they can have no difficulty in understanding this surah at least. All these words are used in Urdu language. Asr, Asr Hazir, Hum Asr Log, contemporary people. Khusr, Khisara, Khusran, all Urdu language. Insan, there is no other word in Urdu for insan. Admi, it is also there. Then only one word, Tawasaw, Amal, Saleh, all these words commonly understood. Tawasi is a bit difficult word for those who don't know the Arabic language, especially the grammar. But the root is wasiyah, and this is used in Urdu language. It's only the verb form from wasiyah. Haq and sabr, as if they are the words of Urdu language. And why I am emphasizing this point? Mind you, 1/3 of the total population of the Muslim Ummah resides in the former Indian subcontinent. Out of 1,200 million Muslims, you have 400 in Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. 1/3. So Urdu language is very important. It is understood throughout the Indian peninsula. Even the southmost tip, there also Urdu language can be understood. It's very important. Anyhow, now I'm coming to the tazakkur from this surah. First of all, let there be an analysis. This surah, as I told you, comprises of 3 ayat. But note here, the sentence is one. Wal asr. It's a testimony, it's an oath. But on what thing? Oath is taken on something, some promise or some news. Only oath or swearing doesn't mean anything. So wal asr cannot give any meaning unless it is attached to the second ayah. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr. The second ayah is a complete sentence in itself. Innal insana lafi khusr. It gives you a general rule. And the third ayah is giving an exception to that general rule. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Exception has no meaning without the general rule being mentioned first. So it cannot give any meaning unless it is attached to the second ayah. So it can be said that this is one sentence. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. It's one sentence. Or what can be said at the maximum is that there are 2 sentences. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. The statement is complete. The kalam is mufid. And again, second, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Again, this statement is complete. Kalam is mufid. Kalam tam. The central is the ayah number 2, which is central also numerically. Innal insana lafi khusr. On this subject, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swearing by the time, the fleeting time. I have now used my own translation. Fleeting time. I will discuss later somewhat in detail in this concept of time. But here, please take it from me, the fleeting time. Verily, all humans, al-insan, there is hasr in it. All humans, and males and females both included. That is why I am using the word all humans, so that not only men but women are also included, are doomed, except those who had the real faith, real iman, which resulted in pious deeds, good deeds, righteous deeds, and then which led to exhorting others also for whatever is true, whatever is right. And then when there is need of patience and forbearance and endurance and steadfastness, exhorting each other to this also. So this is one statement. Now keep this statement before you. Try to carve it into the tablet of your hearts. And now try to find out the real lesson in it. Number 1, absolutely apparent, just like the oil on the surface of the sea. This surah has given us a criteria of success. What are the conditions of success? What's the concept of success? Everybody can understand. Every human being wants success. Nobody likes failure. But the concepts are different. 99.9 recurrent % people think that success depends upon wealth, accumulation of wealth and belongings and property. It corresponds to status in life, status in the society. It depends upon fame and honor and reputation. Or it is based on ostentation or worldly authority and power. These are the criteria of success. He has gathered a lot of money. He is a very successful person. He has attained that position of presidentship of his country. He is a very successful person. He has built so many mills, starting from a small factory. Well, he is a very successful person. He has so much property. Well, definitely, he has the assets, investments. Oh, he is a very successful person. He is very famous. He is known everywhere in the world. His name is very high. So he is a successful person. This is the basis. And according to this basis, our attitude is decided. Gather money by hook or crook. Attain high position, either by deceiving the people, slogan mongering, telling lies. But you must reach the pinnacle of authority. Actually, it's the organic relationship between these two. The concept we have of success and our attitude in life, they must correspond to each other. What to speak of adult people, even children, schoolboys, schoolgirls, they have some concept and they are striving for it. Well, the doctors are very respected in this society. They are the moneyed people, no doubt. So I should be a doctor. And so on. So this is the basic question tackled here. This surah tells us success doesn't depend on money. Success doesn't depend on property, on name or fame or reputation or worldly honor. None of these things has to do anything with success. If only you have the belief that this is the word of Allah. It's a big if, no doubt. On the other hand, success depends on iman. It depends upon amal salih. It depends upon tawasi bil haqq. It depends upon tawasi bil sabr. Only if we can have the real faith. Now the world of difference, you can very well imagine, that will come as a result of the change of the concept of this success. To give you a manifestation of that change, even if you are Fir'aun of Misr or Namrud of Iraq, you are not successful. Even if you have the wealth of Qarun of Bani Israel, you are not successful. They were doomed. They met utter failure. But even if you were starving, if you had no shelter, no roof over your head, but you had Iman and Amal Saleh and Tawasi bil Haqq and Tawasi bil Sabr, you are successful. What a world of difference. There's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, there are people whom people won't welcome in their groups and society, whom nobody will like to give the hand of his daughter in marriage. If he wants to make some recommendation for somebody, nobody will listen to them. So humble, so poor, so low in the worldly status. But mind you, if they sometimes swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on something, even by mistake, Allah will fulfill their oath. That is the condition and that is the status of those persons in the eyes of Allah. Don't try to see them with your eyes. Try to see them with the eyes of Allah. What was the worldly status of Bilal, of Abu Huraira, of Abu Zar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu? About Abu Zar, the Prophet said, Man kana yasurruhu wa yanzura ila zuhd Isa, falyanzur ila sahibi Abi Zar. Aw kama qala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whosoever likes to see with his own eyes the piety of Jesus, let him see my friend Abu Zar. That's the position in the eyes of the Prophet, in the eyes of Allah. But did he have any wealth, any home or hearth, any property? Nothing. This is actually the foremost thing about which we should brood and ponder. This surah is giving us a concept and a criterion of success. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Those who don't have these four things, they are doomed. They might be kings or presidents or billionaires, leaders. They might have any name, any fame, any prosperity, any amount of property, any amount of assets, any status in the world. If they are deprived of these four things, they are doomed. But please let me make a mention here. To acknowledge this fact is easy. To accept is practically, it's not so easy. Very hard, very difficult. Why? Because we live in this world of matter. We have been made to live in this world of matter. We have manifestations of wealth around us, of prosperity, luxury, big mansions, big palaces, very long and new cars, all manifestations of prosperity and status symbols. Man is influenced. You find an impression. You are influenced. There's a very beautiful couplet in Persian. दरमियाने कारे दरिया तख्ता बंदम कर गई, बाज़मी गोई के दामन तरमकुन होशियार बाश. Oh Allah, you have left me here on a piece of wood in a sea. I'm floating in a sea. And you want from me that I shouldn't allow my clothing to be drenched. How is it possible? Darmiyane kaare dariya. We are living here. We are influenced. Even the biggest people are influenced. At least temporarily. I don't think no human can remain uninfluenced. As long as he is human. And now this is the reason why the Sahaba narrated to each other Surah Al-Asr. To shed off these influences. Just when it is snowing, what do? Remove the snow. Otherwise, maybe you are buried under it. So shedding off that snow is necessary for survival. So these influences which are coming on you every moment. When you see these signs and symptoms of status and prosperity and wealth and well-being and status, everything, these influences come. They affect you. They affect your thinking. They influence your value structure. And there's a continuous need of shedding them off. Clean yourself. Clean your thinking. Clean your mind of these evil influences. And for that, the Sahaba Ikram made it a habit. Whenever they met, they recited to each other Surah Al-Asr. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. This is the lesson. This is the essence of this surah. And you can very well appreciate now the sayings of Imam Shafi'i. Only if you can accept this, well, everything is set right. Only if this truth comes home to you. Only if it remains at the level of your consciousness. Nothing can harm you. لَوْ تَدَبَّرَ النَّاسُ هَذِهِ السُّورَةَ لَوَسِعَتْهُمْ لَوْ لَمْ يُنَزَّلْ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ سِوَاهَا لَكَفَتِ النَّاسِ. Second important point about the lesson or essence of this surah is that here the minimum prerequisites of success and salvation are being discussed. Not the conditions of high level. It's not said that those who fulfill these four conditions will occupy very high position in the paradise. Logically, what would it have meant? For less you can have a lesser position. Okay. I'm contented with a lesser position in heaven, in paradise. So there's no need of fulfilling all this standard and all this criteria. But what's the construction? Verily, by the token of time, by the fleeting time, all humans are doomed. Except those who fulfill these four conditions. So it's the minimum level. It's not the A level or B level. It's just the pass marks, not the first division, not the second division. Actually, the lecture which I referred to, which has been printed in English also, I delivered it to the students of the HSN College at Lahore. So I used these wordings, because the students can understand first division, second division. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not discussing the first or the second division, it's the pass marks. Otherwise you fail, you are doomed. So this is the lowest, because of our weakness. In this worldly affairs, we want to go higher and higher up. And for the affairs of the hereafter, we are very contented type of people. We can do with the minimum. Hence you have to be warned that this is the minimum. Nothing doing. Beyond that, below that. No concept of success. Realization of this fact, that this is the minimum, will result in that every Muslim will try to put in maximum effort, at least to pass, at least to be saved from the fire of hell. So then he must exert. And then the effort and the exertion that one will put in will be proportionate. If it is high, well, we can, just as I said, we could be contented with some low position. The third and the most important point is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid down four preconditions for success, all these four are inevitable, necessary. You can't leave any one of them on your own. First of all, we must know that in Quran there is not a single word only for rhyme or exaggeration. This is all al-haq. Each and every word is al-haq. In our poetry, in our worldly speeches, we do exaggerate. Especially in poetry, for the sake of rhyme or rhythm, we add words. There are additional words. But in Quran, it's no poetry. Each and every word has to be taken seriously. Due attention has to be paid to it. And when Allah says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Is it poetry? Is it exaggeration? Inevitable. All the four are inevitable. There can be levels. Some level of Iman. There can be higher level of Iman. There can be higher level of Iman. Still higher level of Iman. But corresponding to the level of Iman, there should be Amal Saleh. At a higher level of Iman, the Amal Saleh will also be raised. At still higher level of Iman, the level of Amal Saleh will still more be raised. But the third thing, Tawasi bil Haq, it should be there. Otherwise you will be called dumb shaitan, a shaitanul akhras. You know a truth, and you are not ready to proclaim it. You are the dumb devil. You have to say it out. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who is more unjust than the person who has hidden a shahada, a testimony with him from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you hide the testimony, you are the biggest azlam. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Then there must be forbearance. The level of forbearance and endurance and patience will also increase. But all the four things are basically essential, inevitable. None of these can be eliminated. And I have used a simile. It's very easy and very simple. You go to a physician for some ailment of yours, and the physician writes a prescription having 4 medicines. You say, oh, I'll take only one. What will happen? Now the responsibility of the prescription lies on you, not on the physician. Maybe some medicine had some side effects, injurious effects, and he had added a corrective for that to eliminate the evil effects, the bad effects. And you have omitted that part of the prescription. Will you be doomed or not? The prescription is to be taken in toto. Take it or leave it. Either you think you are the physician, then you are free to prescribe. But if you have gone to a physician, the whole prescription that he suggests is to be taken in toto. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given 4 things. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Who has the authority to delete any one of them? What we think is that Iman is sufficient for salvation. What does it mean? The rest of this surah is poetry, simple. Exaggeration, nothing else. There can be no salvation without good deeds. Not only good deeds at the personal level, but at the social level. The endeavor to transform this society into a good Muslim society. By tawasi bil haqqi wa tawasi bil sabr. If you are not doing it, your prayers and your fastings goes in vain. No weight in the balance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be a proportionate. It has to be an organic whole. What's the difference between the organic and inorganic? When there is 1 pound or 1 kilogram of gold, you can divide it into tolas and milligrams, etc., ounces. But a cat weighing 1 kilogram cannot be broken into pieces. It won't be a cat now. It's an organic whole, a living entity. So actually, this has to be taken as an organic whole. All these 4 conditions are essential prerequisites of salvation. And in this regard, let me quote the most decisive comment and verdict of Al-Imam Al-Razi, rahimahullah. Most beautiful sentence. اعلم أن هذه الآية فيها وعيد شديد لأن الله تعالى حكم بالخسار على جميع الناس إلا من كان آتيا بهذه الأشياء الأربعة وهي الإيمان والعمل الصالح والتواصي بالحق والتواصي بالصبر فدل ذلك أن النجاة معلقة بمجموع هذه الأشياء. He was a logician, a philosopher. And the most important aspect of his exegesis, his tafsir, is that he analyzes the text. What are the possibilities? Then what are the problems? What are the questions which arise? And then he tries to solve the question. Analytical style is of Imam Razi rahimahullah. I think this sentence is most profound. O Muslim, just imagine, please understand, there is a great threatening and menacing statement in this surah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared doom for all of humanity, except for those who fulfill these 4 conditions. Not 1, not 2, not 3, all the 4. فَدَلَّ ذَلِكَ, it guides us to the result, inevitable result. أَنَّ النَّجَاةَ مُعَلَّقَةٌ بِمَجْمُوعِ هَذِهِ الْأَشْيَاءِ, that the salvation and the success on the Day of Judgment is attached to, is conditional with all these 4 things taken together. So this is the 3rd important point. And let me say here one more thing. Actually, these 4 things are one, because the inevitable consequence and result of real faith is amal salih. It's impossible that you have real faith, the burning faith, the living faith, the personal conviction, and you don't act according to it. It's impossible. The difference is between the verbal attestation of the faith and the real conviction. Here lies the world of difference, the total difference. We are Muslims only on the basis of a verbal attestation. We profess, we claim, we testify. Nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. It's a testimony. It's a verbal attestation and nothing else. And so long as it doesn't go down into the depths of our hearts, there can be a contradiction in whatever we say and whatever we do. And that is the condition of the most of the Muslims today. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. And why it is so? وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. The Iman has not entered your hearts as yet. It's only on the tips of your tongues or on your lips. قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Ayah number 14 of Surah Al-Hujurat. But such people are also Muslims because they have testified. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Whosoever utters these words, whether he was Hindu or Parsi or Sikh or Christian, he becomes a Muslim immediately. But Islam is something else, Iman is something else. Iman means yaqeen, conviction. And when there is conviction, your actions, your deeds, they will definitely be changed. That is why the Prophet said, La imana liman la amanata lahu wa la deena liman la ahda lahu. And Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu قال قلما خطبنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا قال لا إيمان لمن لا أمانة له ولا دين لمن لا عهد له. It's very seldom that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave any sermon to us and he didn't include these words in his sermon. There is no iman for such a person who is not amana, who is not trustworthy, who is khain. And there is no deen of a person who doesn't fulfill his words, his promises. No deen, no iman. Simple. Actions and iman, they are joined together, inevitably. As I told you last evening, I spoke for 8 hours last year on this subject, iman. What is iman? Literal meaning of iman. And the videos of those lectures are available. Here I have to go a long way, so I'm only referring. A legal iman, based upon that legal iman, we are Muslims. Real iman is based on the personal conviction in the heart. And for salvation in the hereafter, to be counted a Muslim in this world, you need legal iman. But to be counted as a mu'min on the day of judgment, you need real iman. And that real iman inevitably results in al-amalu salih. That's why Imam Bukhari, he says that good deeds are integral part of iman. Although there's a difference of opinion in this interpretation, I've discussed these things in very detail, much detail. Only if you can listen to those audio tapes or view those video tapes. And in the same way, Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi. Fa in lam yastati' fa bilisanihi. Fa in lam yastati' fa biqalbihi. Wa dhalika adhaful iman. If you can't call a spade, you can't take the courage of standing up and saying, this is wrong, this is haram, you have no iman. This hadith is from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala, reported by Imam Muslim, rahimahullah. Whosoever amongst you sees something wrong, something haram, something which is according to the Sharia not permissible, which is munkar, it is his duty to change it with force if he has it. But if he can't do it, then at least with his tongue, he should say it. This is wrong, don't do it. And then there's a concession from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the weak also. If even that courage you can't gather, at least feel in your heart some pain as to why this is happening. And this is the weakest point of iman. In another hadith which is reported by Imam Muslim, from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the final wordings are, وَلَيْسَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ حَبَّةُ خَرْدَلٍ. Beyond this, there is not even a grain of iman. If you see bad things even, then don't feel even. You don't feel any pain in your heart. There is no iman whatsoever. It's a categorical statement. وَلَيْسَ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ حَبَّةُ خَرْدَلٍ. So actually all these things, and now this is the test of the character. If you have said something which is true, which is correct, which is right, which is just, and if there is some resentment, some friend has become angry, and you have to undergo some loss, and now you are trembling, now you are retracing your steps, you don't have any character. You are a characterless person. The strength of character, what does it mean? Say out the truth, and then be ready for the consequences, whatever they may be. As Luqman the wise, rahimahullah, he said to his son, Ya bunayya aqimi salah, wa'mur bil ma'ruf, wanha 'anil munkar, wasbir 'ala ma asabak, inna zalika min 'azmi al-umur. Oh my beloved son, establish the prayer. Command to others whatever is right and just. Forbid from whatever is wrong and unjust. And then be ready and take all the persecution that comes to you. Because this path needs strength of character. Azmil umur. Azima. You must have that strength of character in you. So actually these four things, Allah has only explained. Otherwise these four things are one. If Iman is correct, Amal will be durust. It will become correct itself. When it reaches immaturity, tawasi bil haq, tawasi bil sabr will come. To give you an example, if you have a seed or a fruit kernel or stone, it's healthy seed, and you have the healthy soil. You sow the seed. What will happen? 2 leaves will sprout out. Then it will grow. In some time it will grow into a tree. Then it will bear fruit. So actually Iman is the seed. Then the tree which is coming up, it's the Amal Saleh. And the fruit which it is bearing is Tawasi bil haqq wa Tawasi bil sabr. So it's an organic whole. A tree is an organic whole. It's a living organism. So this is the third point about the tadakkur. Or if we include that analysis also, that is the fourth, and now the final point is just pay attention to the eloquence and emphasis. Wal asr, Allah is swearing on this statement. Although without his swearing and without his taking the oath, whatever he said, to a moment it must be acceptable. But to lay emphasis on it, wal asr, then every Arabic knowing person knows inna is for emphasis. Ta'keed. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Al-insan hasr. All humans included. La, lafi, la again for ta'keed. Then the jumla ismiya has a ta'keed in itself. All the modes of emphasis available in Arabic language have been grouped together in this ayah. None has been left over. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. Such emphasis, so emphatic a statement. And we think that we believe in it. So eloquence and emphasis of the highest order. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Now, I am taking one exception to the decision that I took, that I won't go into any details regarding the tadabbur on this surah. The exception I want to make is wal asr, because other things will be discussed in different lessons, different parts, which are included in this selected course of study. But this word will not reappear. What does it mean? It's very important that today you have a concept that time and space are joined together into one whole. Time is not separate from the space. We have a concept of a 3-dimensional space: height, breadth, length, or depth, breadth, length. But after the revolution which occurred in the world of mathematics and physics, from the days of Einstein, the concepts have changed. Time is the 4th dimension of space. Although unimaginable, we can't imagine it. But the mathematical equations prove it. You have to have Iman bil Ghaib. Something might be unimaginable, still it can be true. Now, Arabic language seems to be very profound in this respect. If we consider the different words that have been used, waqt, this word, although It appears in Quran, but not with such emphasis or splendor or grandeur. The two words which appear are al-asr, ad-dahr. And with both start two surahs, Suratul Asr, wal-asr innal insana lafi khusr. Suratul Dahr, hal ata ala al-insani heenum min ad-dahri lam yakun shay'an mazkura. Inna khalaqna al-insana min nutfatin amshajin nabtalih faj'alnahu sami'an basira. And in both of these terms, the concept that comes before us is the time and space complex. But in the word of Asr, it's the time element which is more emphasized. In the case of Dahr, it is the space element which is more emphasized. But both are similar to each other regarding the point that the complex time and space complex is present in both these words. Now, Asr actually time. And you must be knowing, if you have studied philosophy, this concept of time is a very difficult question of philosophy. What's time? Unsettled up till now. We don't know what is time. But they divide time usually into categories. The serial time, which is passing. In this serial time, there was past, there is present, there will be future. It's the passing time, the fleeting time. And the other is the pure duration of the absolute time, in which there is no past or future or present. Pure duration, absolute time. Serial time versus absolute time. Now, Asr denotes to serial time, which passes. That is why I selected from those translations which I read out to you, fleeting word, the word fleeting. By the fleeting time. This time is fleeing and fleeting. Because I read in my high school days a poem, the Psalm of Life. Time is fleeting. Art is long and time is fleeting. And our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. The beating of the heart is like the beating of the drum, which is accompanying the dead body of some general army officer. Step by step, that dead body is nearing its grave. And with each step, there is the beat of the drum. In the same way, this beating of your heart, each beating is taking you nearer and nearer to the grave. This is the reality of your life. Art is long and time is fleeting. And our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. Now what's the result? Then what should we do? Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. All wisdom is common to all humanity. The same wisdom of Suratul Asr, glimpses of those wisdoms you can see in this poem. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest. And the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Body is from the dust, it will return to the dust, but your soul and spirits, they are not from the dust, not from the clay. They have come from somewhere else. يَسَأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. Whatever came from the grave, from the dust or the clay, will return to the grave. But whatever came from high, from the Lord, it will return to the Lord. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Dust thou art, to dust return. This was not spoken of the soul. The same wisdom, the same hikmah. But I was only quoting this for this word fleeting time. Now this is actually to arouse you out of slumber. For the soul is dead that slumbers. We are slumbering, unmindful of the real goal of life. forgetting our death, which is inevitable. The only thing which is inevitable and most certain about life is death. You can't be sure that you will be able to see the sun of tomorrow. Can anybody be? Who can be sure he'll be able to reach his house, his family? The most certain thing in life is death. And we try to ignore it. Even if the idea of death comes, we want to just shut it off. Even when we are accompanying the dead body's janaza, and we are ourselves lowering the dead body into the grave, we don't think that might be, I am in this place tomorrow. We want to avoid even the thought to arouse you out of that slumber. Walas, time is fleeting, it's going. Time is money. It's the most precious thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. It's not to be wasted. Imam Razi quoted the example of a seller of ice. He was screaming like anything because it was time, night was coming, and he knew a vendor of vegetables, he was not too worried that much because he can keep the vegetables for the next day and sell them, maybe at a bit lower price. But what about the ice? It's going. If it is not sold immediately, it will become water. The basic investment will go. He was screaming like anything. That should be the example of man. Time is going. Walas, beware of the time. Al-waqtu sayfun qati'. It's the cutting sword. So that word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used here. Walas, by the fleeting time. Second explanation about this word here is that we know that in the Quran we find history of the old nations, old civilizations, how nations rose to pinnacles of strength and glory, how they went down to decadence and even oblivion. Rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Civilizations coming up and going down. Who is the witness, continuous witness of all what is happening? Either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the time. This is the witness. And actually, the oaths and the swearings in Quran, they are for the purpose of witnessing. This fleeting time is testifying, is a witness to the fact that all nations have been doomed except those who took to this path. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And because we see in the Quran, matters were discussed before the beginning of time also. When it was alam amr only, no alam khalq, no creation. Then time actually started when there was the Big Bang, the creation of this universe. Now serial time started. The one dimension of the space separated from the rest of the three. And then again, after the doomsday, there is a time of akhirah. All this is one stretched, you may say, one stretched rope of time from eternity to eternity. And this is the biggest witness to what Allah is saying. Wal asr. This fleeting time is testifying. Innal insana lafi khusr, that all humans are doomed. Illa allazina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Except those who attained, who got the real faith. Their thinking became right, according to the actual realities of the existence. Then who fulfilled the practical requirements of their faith. Whatever was the logical sequence, and consequence of what they believed, they fulfilled it. They might have to undergo hardships. They might have to bear persecutions, just as the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in. But they fulfilled the practical, logical sequences or consequences of their faith. Then they tried to spread the message of Allah, to convey to the others, to share this precious thing with others. Then they made jihad for the cause of Allah. Now, as you must have read a hadith, that Hazrat Aisha al-Mu'mineen radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she was once asked a question by a tabi'i, some of the tabi'is. They went to her and they asked her, tell us something about the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were very surprised to get an answer from al-Mu'mineen, Hazrat Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Don't you people read Quran? They were surprised. We had requested that some seerah, some life of the Prophet ﷺ must be narrated to us. You have been the companion, you have been the wife, you are the nearest and the closest to him. Tell us something about his seerah. And you are questioning, don't you people read Quran? They said, we do read Quran, but we are asking you, oh our brother, about the seerah. What was the reply again? Kana khuluquhul Quran. His seerah, his character, even his life, his biography is in Quran. Isn't Surah Al-Anfal a chapter of the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? It is narrating the events of Ghazwa Badr. What a big chunk of Surah Al-Imran, narrating the events of the Battle of Uhud. It is a part and parcel of the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then as regards the character, the Quran, khulq, kana khuluquhul Quran. As if Quran is to be read. It is something to be read. And Quran manifested as a human person is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this surah actually, this comprises and summarizes the whole seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whole seerah of the companions. These 4 words, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. I end with this and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us the correct understanding of what our deen is and what He demands of us. And He makes us from those. Allahumma ja'alna min ibadika alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. Aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa li sa'iril muslimina wal muslimat.